Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? If there is any issue of video or mic, you can just type it in the chat box. So we'll start the session within few minutes. So good evening, everyone. I'm Tirth Patel, a co-member at ISTE-VIT and your host for this evening. Indian Society for Technical Education is national professional non-profit society. The major objectives of ISC are to assist and contribute to the production and development of top quality professional engineers and technicians required by the industries and other organizations. It gives me immense pleasure to invite Mr. Dhruv Kela. He's software engineer at Digital Ocean and alumni of our very own university, VID Vellore. His field of expertise are cloud computing, operating systems, data science, and machine learning. He is a maintainer for Fluent project, which is used by companies like Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, etc. Apart from that, he is an active contributor to open source projects by DigitalOcean and KeepSphere. He recently gave talks on his work on Open Source Summit and FluentCon. So without making you wait any longer, let's start Open Source 101 with Mr. Dhruv Kela.
Thank you, Keith. First thing, it's a pleasure to be back and giving a talk at VIT. I am so grateful to everyone during my time at VIT and the professors. Like, I think I'm here because of professors like Dr. Margaret, Dr. Madhu Viswanathan, etc. So today, just a little bit about me. I am an engineer, as Steve said, at uh, DigitalOcean. I graduated in 2016 from VIT. From there, I went over to HPE to work for a couple of years. I came to the US for my master's, and now since about 2020 February, I've been working with DigitalOcean. Before I dive deeper into open source, I am gonna wait. Just give me a second. Let me present my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, you can go ahead.
Perfect. Let me know if there's a font issue and if you want to if you want me to zoom in. Okay. The session's name is Open Source 101, but I've borrowed my slides from Hacktoberfest, so there'll be a little bit of overlapping content. So the agenda for today is what is open source and why do we need open source? What's Hacktoberfest? Why is it so popular in the open source community? And how you can contribute to open source. I remember starting off as a student, I was really intimidated by everything. When everyone like spoke about open source. So I'll try to break it down in as simple terms as possible today. So what is open source? I really like this quote by Eddie. Open source is social media on steroids. It's literally like Instagram. On Instagram, you comment on things, you like things. You can do the same thing with open source as well, but just one step further. Over here, you can comment on code, you can like and star repositories you like, you can, in fact, contribute to code yourself. And I think that is why I would call it uh, a social media on steroids. So the more traditional definition of open source software is software with source code that anyone can inspect, modify, and enhance. So what that essentially means is all the code is out there for you to look at. You can read every line, you can see what's happening behind the scenes, and you're free to change whatever you want and work with it the way you think is useful to your needs. The next question comes is, why do we need open source? So one question which I get a lot from a lot of people who are non-programmers and non-coders is that, hey, open source is not for us. But open source basically impacts everyday life. Majority of the internet is built on open source. Most of the servers, for example, most of the servers right now are Linux-based servers. Linux is completely open source. All the way from using, let's say, to give you an example of another aspect, let's say you have a website which you're hitting. Now, maybe that website is built on top of technology such as Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an open source project, which was, open source, which was initially a closed project by Google, and then they made it open source. The second point is it helps developers who don't have to build tools. It helps developers. So basically, developers don't have to build tools from ground up. Let's say, for example, you are writing in a particular language. Do you have to, and that language is open source, like for example, Golang. You don't have to write the language from scratch. You can directly just pick it up and start using it. So it saves a lot of time. You can concentrate on the product rather than the tools you need to build that product. The third thing, which I kind of mentioned and touched upon earlier, was transparency. You can look through each and every line of code. Everything is out there in the public, and you can use it the way you want to. Flexibility. Flexibility, again, kind of building upon transparency. When you have each and every line of code in front of you, you're free to modify it and make sure that the software which you use works the way you want it to work. And the last one is collaboration. You suddenly have thousands and thousands of people all across the world who are collaborating on a project with you. You have, if you get stuck, there's the whole community out there to help you out. So collaboration is an extremely important part of open source. One other question which I had as a student is why is it important as a student to worry about open source? First thing, I am a strong believer of your open source profile is greater than your LinkedIn profile. If you have good open source contributions, I don't think you have to worry about looking out for jobs. There are people who are going to come to you with opportunities. Second, as students, we really don't know how software is built at a professional level. What we are taught in school and what we prepare for interviews is nothing like what it is in the real world. Um, DSA is probably one of the most important things you need to learn for cracking interviews, right? But where do you how much do you use DSA when you are actually working at a company? Like it's at a bare minimum. What you actually do in a company is work on projects which you see, like big open source projects which you see, like Kubernetes or Docker, etc. So it gives you an idea of how to contribute and prepare, and it prepares you for the real world. So before we dive into looking at some open source code, I wanted to get you familiarized with certain open source lingo. Uh, so Git, what is Git? And is Git the same thing as GitHub? And then there is GitLab, there's Bitbucket. There are so many other terms. So to start off with, Git is a version control system, and GitHub is a web UI which is built on top of Git. We will see and find a way around GitHub soon enough. The second thing is branch. What is a branch? Generally, you have some code, and if there are, let's say, tens or hundreds or thousands of people who are working on the same code, what you do is create a branch out of the code, which is essentially taking a snapshot of the code and at a given point of time, and then working um, out of that snapshot and making your changes to that snapshot. Third is the community. One thing which is very important for any open source project for it to be successful is to have a strong community around it. Community are basically a set of people who are passionate about the project and who contribute to the project, which includes maintainers as well as committers. Community guidelines. One thing which I love about tech is it's extremely inclusive, and we strive to be inclusive. So community guidelines include details on how you should contribute code to what we, turn down any negativity and make sure that there's no negativity when people are, um, discussing in the community, and that could be the negative could be targeted towards any group. So there's no discrimination allowed. Maintainers. Maintainers are people who maintain a project. So they're the ones who merge your code in. They're the ones who review your code, and they were the ones who are in charge of making sure that the product or the code or the open source project is successful. Pull request. Now let's say you have made changes to an open source project, and now you want it to be you want those changes to be reflected in the main project so that everyone can make use of it. So you create a pull request against the main project, and if it gets merged, your changes would be for everyone else to see and use. Coming over from pull request, there's something called commit. Commit basically means making changes. Once you have a pull request which is approved by the maintainers, you can merge it with the main code, and it gets committed. So that's a commit. And the most important thing is Readme. One thing which intimidated me a lot was how do you start? What are open source projects about? What do they do? How do I understand all of this? And your first thing, but the first document which you look at is the Readme document. It gives you an explanation of what the project is, what it's supposed to do, how you're supposed to use it, and it will link you out to any contributing document, like how can you actually contribute to the project. I know this seems very confusing and a lot of things, but hopefully, going through a GitHub page of a project would make things easier. So, what does open source code look like? Okay, is the font all right, or do you want me to zoom in a little bit? I am gonna assume it's all right. Okay, as soon as you look at an open source project, uh, which is a big project, let's say, for example, the Go language project, it just seems really intimidating. There's so much going on around here. There are issues, there are pull requests, discussions, projects. But as I told you, like, the first thing you want to start off with is the README. So as soon as you open a project on GitHub, the first thing which it shows is the README, and you go through it. So it tells you about Go, which is an open source programming language that makes it easy to build simple, reliable, and efficient software. And then the next thing you see how you download and install it and contributing to it. Another way to look at contributing documents is going to the contributing.md file, which is in a lot of repos generally. Once you click on the contributing document, it tells you how do you. Okay, let's talk about what an issue is before we actually dive further into contributing. You see these 5,000 plus issues. They are basically either feature requests, they are bugs which people have found and they want them to be fixed. So they're basically requests for, they're basically requests for enhancing the project further. So we'll probably go into an issue in a smaller project, but just getting back to contributing.md, it just gives you an overview of how you're supposed to contribute to a project. And right now, I know Go or any of the big projects like Kubernetes, Docker, etc., are going to be really intimidating. But then there are smaller projects which you can look at. For example, we have something called the DigitalOcean Marketplace Kubernetes project, where we post issues as well. So the issue, one of the issues which we had, okay, so generally an issue which is useful for beginners has the label good first issue. It means that it doesn't require a lot of technical knowledge, and it is a great way for first timers to start contributing. So let's look at this issue. There are a number of stacks which do not have these two scripts. So basically, how you could help this open source project is by adding the upgrade.sh script and the uninstall.sh script. And you've been given an example of an upgrade.sh script and an uninstall.sh script. So all you need to do is make sure you add it to other stacks as mentioned. Now you'd ask, hey, what are stacks? uh, which which is mentioned here. So that's when you actually look at the repo, and generally there's like a way where you can look at, hey, there's a stacks folder and you have uh, other applications in them, and you would probably want, so this application, for example, has an install script and the upgrade.sh script, but you would want to go to, let's say, a product which doesn't have it. For example, the Prometheus stack, and basically adding that. So that's a great first issue for you to get started. But all of you would be like, hey, this is way too complicated. We don't know how to do this. And what about people who do not code? Is there something for them? Yes. Contributing to open source is just not only limited to code. There's a lot of other ways you can actually contribute. One good example is this repository. It has, it's basically a bunch of free programming books, and if you want to contribute to it, just look at the issues, search for a issue which is a good first issue. So for example, this is a good first issue, and what it asks for is developing an advanced Windows Phone 7.5 app that connects to the cloud under Windows 8. So basically, it doesn't include the book. What it does is you just need to fix the link. So that's not code. That's basically on the side of documentation. So there are a lot of ways you can actually help out, even if you don't want to code. So getting back to, okay, yeah. So that was a brief overview of what open source is. Now I want to come to what is Hacktoberfest and why Hacktoberfest is such a big thing in open source. So Hacktoberfest is a month-long celebration of open source software organized by DigitalOcean in partnership with Intel, Applied, and DeepSource. During the month of October, we invite all open source enthusiasts, beginners, and developers to contribute to open source community. And what you do get in return is either you can help out by reducing carbon emission by, once you create 4 pull requests, you can donate a tree, or you get a free t-shirt or some swag for your contribution to open source. You can contribute to open source in a variety of ways. Prepare and share your project for collaboration, contributing to the betterment of a project via pull requests, organizing an event, mentoring others, and donate directly to open source projects. So this is the first set of rules. These rules are for mostly everyone like you who is watching this talk, who are not maintainers right now, who are right now just trying to get into the open source getting into the open source world. So you need to create 4 pull requests to compete and to complete across GitHub or GitLab. Don't worry about GitLab as such. It is similar to GitHub with the version control. It is also based on a version control system of Git. On any of the two, either GitHub or GitLab, you would, if you create 4 pull requests which are accepted, you would be able to, complete the challenge. The PRs must have the Hacktoberfest accepted label. Basically, this label is added by maintainers to your pull request to make sure that you're not creating spam PRs. I know a lot of you get intimidated. Hey, what if the work which I've done is not good enough? What if it's spam? What if people have an issue with it? Will I be ridiculed publicly, etc.? No, you won't be. Everybody's really accepting. and they'll give you constructive feedback as long as they see a genuine effort on your side. Also, stating that, hey, this is my first time I'm creating a PR really helps in the comment. And rules for maintainers. So maintainers are people who own own repositories. So for you to complete the Hacktoberfest challenge, it is so that you can action on your action on pull requests and make sure that you either have them accepted, you approve them, or you merge them, or even actually label them as spam or invalid. This is really good because it celebrates the maintainers who put in a lot of effort in maintaining these amazing open source projects. Why do we continue to organize Hacktoberfest? People create awesome stuff, learning opportunity, which is, I know to a lot of people, it is just for a t-shirt, a free t-shirt which you get, but the amount you learn is immense, and it helps everyone. It helps the whole community in the longer run. Introducing all of you to open source early on, and once you start committing to it early on, I'm pretty sure all of you are going to be continuing with it, and you're going to build really amazing things. It welcomes new community members, introduces people to free and open source software, grows real world experience, which is extremely important if you are going to pursue your career in the field of tech. Making contributions which are not just about code, as I mentioned earlier. It's even if you're not into coding, you can still make contributions. It creates job opportunities if you're good with your open source contributions. I can guarantee you that you would have some great opportunities in companies, and turns contributors. Eventually, the hope is all of you who are going to be first-time contributors potentially are going to turn into maintainers, and you'll be maintaining the software yourself. And hopefully, some of you turn into maintainers soon. So this is a video of how you actually create your first pull request. It goes from the absolute basics of how you clone a repository, etc., etc., etc. I am gonna share this with the team so that they can forward it to you, and hopefully we could get you started. Sign up on hacktoberfest.com. And there are a bunch of resources. And if you need any help, feel free to hit people up. The community is absolutely great. For most open source projects, they are ready to help. I'm going to send you out a few links which could help you to start off with open source, and walk you through the basics of how you want to install GitHub, how do you clone a repository, how do you create a commit, etc. And yeah, I hope some of you create PRs after the session. Thanks. Okay, so can we have the team back? Yeah.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful session. This session shed light on open source and its importance, along with the ways how to get a head start in the community through Hacktober. Also, we have some questions related to the same, like in our YouTube chat. So let's go into them by the audience. And also, I would like to say the chat box is still open for the participants if they want to pose their questions. Okay. So, sir, the first question is by Sahil Kaling. He wants to ask you that can you say about your first open source contribution?
Yeah. So actually, I'm not going to go with the first open source contribution because the first one which I did was I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. But I am going to talk about the first open source contribution where I knew what I was doing. And that happened actually pretty late. That happened in 2019. That was just like 1 year ago. Okay, where I knew, hey, I had an idea in my mind, and I was like, you know what, this is what we need, which was marketplace Kubernetes, a repo which I actually just went over, which I'm a maintainer for now. Um, and one of the difficulties which I found were a lot of people wanted to install and maintain applications uh, for their clusters, and I just wanted it to be really easy for them to use it. So that was my first open source contribution, knowing what I was actually doing. On the other hand, but yeah, you know what? 2019, and 2 years later, I'm probably a maintainer for uh, some some really big projects. So I think in 2 years it can make a lot of difference. That being said, like the first open source contribution which I did was something which was not working for me, and then I just merged the code because I somehow had access and I broke everything down. So yeah, that has also happened, but people were really kind enough to actually give me positive feedback.
Great, sir.
Yes.
Like, it
Mhm.
was good to know that it was so late and the heights you have achieved in the less time. So yeah, it can be inspiration for all of us, I guess, who are
I'm
just
telling
thinking.
you, if any one of you, um, I know at first it feels really intimidating, but give it a shot. If you are thoroughly confused, ask people for help. There are All you need to do is ask for help, and there'll be a lot of people who will be ready to help you. And if all of you, I don't know if you guys are in your first year or your fourth year, but uh, start using Linux. I mean, you don't have to use Linux on your laptop. Just you can go to a virtual machine online on any of the cloud, like obviously you've got DigitalOcean, AWS, etc. Use the free credits you get as students and start playing around with a Linux machine. It is probably one of the most important things.
Sure,
Yeah.
sir. We would like to note it and just put it into action. Sure. So again, sir, we got a question from Sahil himself, like how to get familiar with different code base fast while doing contribution in different repos.
So initially, what I'm going to tell you is you to don't go around a lot of code bases because there are so many of them and it can intimidate you. It can be overwhelming for people. Uh, Stick to a technology which you're passionate about. Let's say you are passionate about Python, right? It's a language which most of us learn in college. You can go to the open source repo of Python and just start looking there. Like, hey, how is Python built? How What is the source code like? So you can take one project which you're like passionate about. Now Python also, like some of you might say, hey, this is really big. Take something smaller. Start off with something which you think you're comfortable with, and then obviously you can, scale up. That's one way of doing it. Some people say just dive into a deeper project. So yeah.
Okay, so it was good.
It kind of depends on your preference, but in my personal experience, I think the fact that I started with a smaller project helped me a lot more.
Yes. So there's a question by Samiksha. How does one go about looking for their first open source repo or project? Okay, so I guess you already
Okay,
answered it.
so
Like
another
there's
thing which you can do is a lot of uh, so you can go to a repo, and then you can look for labels and like go to issues and look for like good first issue, uh, and filter issues by that label, and those issues are meant for beginners. Another thing which is a very useful tool is looking at pull requests. So pull requests are basically code changes which have been merged. Let me give you an example actually, because this is, let me share my screen for a second. Now, when you click on the pull request tab, you see the open ones. Now, instead of going on the open ones initially when you're starting off, just click on the closed ones and see, hi, what would what were the pull requests like? So, for example, there is one here and there's like one here. This, you look at the files changed, you look at the conversation, and the files changed. When you look at the files change, all you see is, hey, you know what? There is just this change. What's basically happening is the version is changing, and that's a valid contribution, and it helps people. So this is like an example of a very small contribution, which is extremely useful. Another contribution over here is where somebody is adding things. Once you read through the code, what's happening? So I'm assuming you've already read the contributing.md document, and now you just see, hey, this is how people are adding and merging code, and it would be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to the next question. Tiham Hussain is asking, what is the difference between free source and open source softwares? And he also wants to know if there is any advantage of one over the other.
Okay, so I'm actually not very sure about that question, but I'm going to go on a hunch. So open source software is not always free. I mean, to edit. Like, while you have software, you have different licenses under them, and depending on the license and how you're using it, it comes. If you're making certain changes, and either certain licenses say, hey, you know what, you're making a change, and if you're using that change, you gotta make sure that you put those changes out in the public too. You can't keep them closed source, etc. I'm assuming free sources is everything free, but I'm not sure of the answer.
Okay, sir. So maybe we got a question that would be in mind of everyone, like for the freshers to the seniors. Like Chetan asked, how significant is open source for placements?
Okay, so this is a very good question. Okay, I'll give you two examples from my batch. The first example was most of us, me included, where we didn't have any open source contributions. We, studied DSA, went ahead, and we got jobs. All of us got jobs. Some of us got great jobs. The other example was this one guy who was an active open source contributor. He didn't sit for placements because he had a job before any one of us did. Just because, he had contributed, he had made some amazing contributions. He just reached out to companies and said, hey, you know what? These are my contributions. This is what I've done. Why don't you interview me on this? And he had multiple offers. So yeah, I think if you concentrate hard enough, there'll be companies who would be ready to take you. And different companies have different requirements. Like probably a Microsoft or Facebook or Google would still want DSA, but there are lots of amazing startups and the company which my friend eventually went to was Zomato. So yeah, so there are great startups who look for open source contribution, and it's a testament to how well you uh, understand big projects. And if you can contribute to an open source project as a student, then the time it would take you to ramp up in a company would probably be bare minimum compared to a normal student.
Thank you, sir, for this great experience. So Jayashri is asking, could you elaborate more on any other open source platforms other than GitHub?
There's GitLab. There is now. I would initially stick to GitHub, and there is a reason why I say this is because it has like the biggest community around it, and it has got like a lot of eyes on it. But that being said, there are other platforms like GitLab, which is also built on top of Git. You can have open source projects in Bitbucket, etc. They're all built around the same. Most of them are built around the same concept. But in my personal opinion, I would initially just stick with GitHub.
Okay, thank you, sir. So Suhana Surya wants to ask, are there any repositories or creators who would you like to recommend for making contributions?
So it depends. Maintainers. Okay, I have like a bunch of maintainers who I absolutely love and adore. I follow their work. So there's like Simon Wilson. He was one of the. I had the opportunity to speak to him a few months ago. He's the creator of Django, the Python framework. Then there are people in my company itself who are like amazing open source contributors like Billy Cleek, etc., who have done some great work. As far as which project to choose, probably if somebody has, we could actually take this up on chat. Like if somebody has certain skill sets, and then I could probably look up a project right now and say, hey, you guys can start with this project. So give me a set of your skill set, a brief example, and then we can probably give you an example. So while somebody does that, we can move to the next question.
Yeah. So Darshan is asking, can you tell us more about DigitalOcean?
Okay. So DigitalOcean is a cloud computing platform. What it's essentially known is for making making servers extremely simple to use. Normally, when you go on AWS, for anyone, including me, who's been in the industry for a while, it's so confusing. It is like, what is going on, right? With DigitalOcean, it is targeted towards, towards making things simple. From all the way from pricing, it's probably one of the cheapest platforms out there, to their documentation. Right now, I don't know if any one of you are heavy into making websites or software, but once you start doing it, your go-to place for learning how to do these things is going to be the DigitalOcean documentation. So it's a company which basically has takes simplicity for developers, whether it's their products or their documentation. It's like built for the developers by developers. So yeah, if I have to give a brief overview of what DigitalOcean is, it's that. And one thing, and this is not a plugin or something, but one thing which I feel would be really interesting for newcomers is, normally when you're starting off with a Linux machine, it gets really confusing. Hey, you know what? You have like these servers. How do you maintain a server? There's like a lot of confusion going around. But what new students, or like basically people who are building products, know for a fact is how to code. They can code things. So there are certain things like app platform, which basically says, hey, you don't have to worry about maintaining a server and all the complexities behind Linux, all you need to do is just write simple code and we'll make sure that everything else is done end to end. Yeah. So if you're actually starting off, I started off with my, personal web development journey and all of that through DigitalOcean, even when I was back in uh, uh, Vellore. So it's actually a good place to start off with.
Thank you, sir. So next question is by Snehal. Sir, you are familiar with Kubernetes and Docker. Could you tell us more about how you came in touch with these technologies, as right now they are pretty new to me?
Yes. So to give you a very simple line about what Docker is and what problem it solves. First is there's something which works on your computer, but it doesn't work on a friend's computer, and that's really frustrating. We've like all faced that. I faced that right before my final year thesis at VIT, where my something which was working on my laptop didn't work on my partner's laptop, and everything. I was just like really annoyed. So what Docker does is it creates this small little uh, think of it as like a very mini computer which is constant throughout, and it runs on top of your computer in a way. So that's what Docker is. How did I come across these technologies and why do I know about them? Is the simple answer is I needed it for work when I was at HPE. Mhm. And they trained me at it. But that being said, it is it's it's a must technology now. Like learning how containers are is probably used in industries everywhere. Like most industries use like containers for shipping and deploying code. And if you need like help with okay, so what one thing which you could really help is starting reading these blogs which are amazing. There's something called like Hacker News. um, I like to start my day instead of opening uh, Times of India. I start my day opening Hacker News, and it tells me everything that's going around in the world of tech. So initially, a lot of these things would like when you're reading articles, it'd be a little complicated and go over your head. But you can start but over a period of like 2-3 weeks later, you'll start making sense of everything. So that's how you get introduced to new technologies in a way. And Docker and Kubernetes, I'm sure, like once you guys are even coming close to graduation, you will all know, you'll learn about it.
So, sir, Chetan wants to ask, like, how do I find open source projects to contribute for blockchain tech?
Okay, so blockchain technology, right?
Yeah.
The easiest way to start off with is go on GitHub search for topics, blockchain. There'll be about hundreds and thousands of repos on it. Then what you do is you can either filter by stars. So stars is basically how many people have actually started that repository and follow that repo. So you know what are some of the best projects. If you don't want to go to a very big project, which is like basically like uh, uh, which everybody stars, then you could just sort by best match and then read the description of different projects and see what makes most sense to you and what are you most curious about. I think curiosity plays a big role. You want to know what you're curious about. Once you're curious about, hey, how does this work? Then you go on to the repo. You first read the README. The second thing, it is a contributing.md document. You read the contributing.md document. Third, you pull down the code and run it on the local, you clone the repository, you run it in a local IDE. I use VS Code, so let's say you guys have like VS Code and you run it, you open it on VS Code and start reading code. See where the entry point to the code is. Once you know where the entry point to the code is, then you just like start following code and going around hey, you know what? From here, this happens, this happens, and if you have a question, ask. How does this work? One thing which helped me when I started working on big projects. Well, I came to open source a lot later, but I had started working on bigger projects early enough, and I was always a user of open source technology. And one thing which helped me a lot was having a community within VIT. We had like a bunch of people who knew about these things, so I could like, just ask them questions. Hey, how do I find the entry point to this code? And it'll take you like two, three times where you would be like a little confused. Hey, because there are like so many different folders. What are the folder structure, etc., etc., etc. Once you understand that, it'll be a breeze. At least for the smaller projects. Bigger projects will still take you a lot of time. Another thing which would help you a lot is again, search this on GitHub for project structures. A lot of languages have like different project structures. Just knowing how a repo is generally, how is the code placed and which code is placed in which folder, in the traditional conventional sense, would help you a lot.
So, Shashank is asking, could you suggest some resources to learn Docker?
Yes, I can. I think I do have. Okay. What do you all prefer? Do you prefer videos or do you prefer uh, uh, blogs? As a student, I preferred videos, but now I've
Yes,
shifted to like blogs. Um, okay, yeah. So there are a bunch of free uh, videos online, which on YouTube, Docker, if you just like Google Docker tutorials for beginners, and there's one by Tech World with Nana, which is really nice, and freecodecamp.org. Both of them have got really good resources to just start off and understand what Docker is. Once you start, once you get a little familiarized with what the concept is, then you would want to start, building your own Docker image and trying Docker on your own machine and see how that works. And once you know that, I think that's good enough. That's a good enough state to once you can create your own images and run them. I think that's a good enough place to be in for Docker.
Okay. So, Sir Radhi is asking if you could suggest some projects in ML and Android development.
Okay, so ML so ML is huge, right? Like there is like so many things. Do you want to work on TensorFlow? With neural networks, TensorFlow is like probably one of the most popular repositories for machine learning, right? Again, I think I'm going to use the same answer as before. Search for a project, see what you're comfortable with, and basically see what you're curious about. So that, because if you're curious, you're going to actually explore more into it. Another thing which which you all could do is possibly push code to repo yourself. Even if it's terrible code, it's all right. Like push your own code which you have written. First do that, then create pull requests against your own code. See how all of that works. Like familiarize yourself, and then probably start looking at smaller projects to start off with. But if you want a specific project for machine learning, give me a second. I could, pull something.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah. So look at this project. This has actually got nothing to do with code. is. Hopefully I can share this link here. Yeah, I don't
Okay,
know if
so
it's like
yes, I will forward it to the team. They will post it on YouTube
yeah.
webinar, right?
Yeah, so
Sure.
basically what this project does is uh, it just is a bunch of resources which you need. I know
Okay.
a lot of you feel it has to be code, but you can start off with something which is like documentation based. This project is very helpful to a lot of people, and it just like lists out what resources there are for machine learning. So start off where you feel you're comfortable, and then like keep moving a step ahead.
So yeah, sir, it was good. It was pleasure having you here. I'm pretty much amazed at the heights you achieved in 2 years. I wasn't expecting that thing. So yeah, it was. I'm damn sure that everyone attending the session got a clear insight about October and very much about open source. Thank you very much for joining. So there's a note for participants. You can check out the attendance and feedback forms which are posted in the chat section. Do make sure that you fill the details correctly as it will be reflected on VTop. Uh, yeah, sir, if you have anything.
No, that's it. Thank you for organizing this, and it was a pleasure being here.
Thank you, sir. Also, there's an announcement, one more announcement, that ISTE-VIT also has 3 Hacktober accepted repositories on GitHub. The one is CP Companion, which deals with competitive coding. The Project Archives, which has different projects for ML, WebDev, and AppDev. Then other one is Arduino Amplified, different codes for Arduino. You can just create PRs there, and all the links will be given to you in the chat box, and they are pretty well posted in the description as well. So I hope this session encouraged you to start your open source journey and grow your developer self through this amazing opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.